To refresh our memories of culture, we are going to watch our vocabulary. After we refresh our memories of what culture is, we are going to talk about the culture of a group who was native or original to our land in Indiana. But first, I want us to remember exactly what culture is and what it means. So let's review quickly.
Hello?
What?
Yo,
Hey, sorry, I can't hear you. There's a lot of traffic.
where are you?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Where?
I'm in Dumbo. I gotta hop on the subway here in a sec. But, after I grab a slice.
That's so New York. Pizza and public transportation?
Yeah, but culture is more than that.
For sure.
We're here to talk about culture, yeah. The way of life a group of people shares. Traditions, customs, and language. Whether hero or hoagie, it's still a sandwich.
No mayonnaise, no mayonnaise.
Entertainment like music and art and religious beliefs can be a big part in New York. With its Jewish community, there's kosher food like at this
Let
deli.
me get a roast beef on
A
rye.
culture shares values, morals, and principles.
Like down south, we're awfully hospitable.
And what about the political system? There's a queen and prime minister over in England. Let's not forget about their economy. The way wealth is spread out can determine a lot. See, what you eat, where you hang, who you know, what you wear can be determined by the way a culture's wealth is shared. A culture can be shared by a big or small group. Our country has a culture, but your region does too. Culture is learned and passed down through generations, but it can still evolve and go through changes.
Check it out.
Our culture shapes who we are, from our clothing, food, languages and art, politics, economics, and traditions, social structures, values, and religions. Our culture shapes who we are, from our clothing, food, languages and art, politics, economics, and traditions, social structures, values, and religions.
All right. Mind if I get on this beat?
Yeah, man, come on.
I appreciate you. Look, I'm from Texas, born and raised. Gotta
word?
slow it down a little to talk about how culture moves. Like when people migrate and bring it with them.
Okay, let's go.
Now I don't know where you've been, but no matter what you've seen, cultural diffusion. The spread of culture from one group to another can be rough like from war or smooth like butter. Houston's got a Chinatown. If I need Chinese products, that's where I buy them now. Chinese families moved in and settled down. And the language, food, and customs are all around. Trade, migration, and communication can move culture around the globe and the nation. Okay, so check out Texas. Close to 40% Hispanic, says the census. That's cause we're at the southern border. Mexico is just a little bit further. Mexicans migrate for opportunity, and their culture shapes Texan communities. In Texas, we got bilingual schools where we speak English and Spanish too. And Tex-Mex is its own cuisine. If that's not cultural diffusion, I don't know what it means. What's your culture? What do you like? What do you know? What shapes your life? When it comes to culture, know the golden rule. What's that? Respect other cultures the way you respect yours. 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 Our culture shapes who we are. Our clothing, food, languages, and art. Politics, economics, and traditions. Social structures, values, and religions. Our culture shapes who we are. Our clothing, food, languages, and art. Politics, economics, and traditions. Social structures, values, and religions. Alright, y'all. Just remember this. You gotta respect other cultures the way you respect yours. Vocabulary, signing off. Peace!
Alrighty, so remembering your culture is pretty much every element of your life. It's the language you speak, it's the food that you traditionally eat, it's the type of values that you have, the things that your family might believe in or that your family might practice. It's the different types of art that your community values, whether it's through music or through creation of some type of visual or through dance. So culture has a lot of different elements in it. And we're going to continue studying culture today by looking at the culture of Native American Indians who lived in Indiana. So these are tribes that were that were native to our land long ago and were the original inhabitants of Indiana. We're going to take a look at what life was and is like for this cultural group, and we're going to compare and contrast their cultural elements with our cultural elements in your own life today. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to take a look at this activity called Native American Culture in Indiana. It says, with teacher, watch the video, determine different pieces of Native American culture from the text. You're going to be highlighting Native American culture in your text just along with me. So we're going to do that text reading together. But first, I want us to watch a video of some background knowledge. Okay, let me open this up here. So this is a short YouTube video that's going to give you some background knowledge on Native American culture and what life is like for them. So I got a question in the chat. What are cultural elements? So remember, cultural elements are pretty much anything and everything you can think of in your life. So a cultural element is going to be food, because food can vary based on your culture. It's going to be the language that you speak, because languages change based on your culture as well. It's going to be the types of art that you create or that you enjoy participating in, whether it's a kind of dance or a kind of painting or a kind of music. So the different art that you participate in. It's going to be religious values, because those can change through your culture. So cultural elements are different things that make up your life and what you would do on a daily basis, whether it's what you're eating, what you're watching, what you're participating in, what you're believing or thinking in your head. Those are going to be your cultural elements, okay? Here are some cultural elements of Native Americans. And again, we're going to be comparing and contrasting cultural elements of Native Americans to the cultural elements that we participate in inside of Indiana today. So please make sure that you're looking out for similarities and differences as you watch this. We have a short ad.
Americans, also known as American Indians, Indigenous Americans, and other terms, are the indigenous people of the United States except Hawaii. The name Indian was given by Christopher Columbus, who mistakenly believed he had landed in the Indies. The history of Native Americans in the U.S. began in ancient times, tens of thousands of years ago. Late in the Ice Age, humans journeyed across the Bering Land Bridge that joined Siberia to Alaska. They had gradually migrated across the land and southward into Mexico and beyond. Their descendants explored along the west coast of North America. As early as 1000 BC, they had covered nearly the entire continent. Over thousands of years, as they migrated across the continents, American Indians have developed a variety of languages and civilizations. They came from different tribes, such as in Europe, Asia, or Africa. When the Ice Age ended, the Native Americans developed their tribes by making wise use of natural resources available. They had first experience with growing different crops such as corn and squash, raising animals like turkeys, llamas, and guinea pigs for food, hunting deer, bison, sea mammals, and catching fish by using a variety of efficient methods. Another development during the period before the European invasions was the mound building. From the present-day region of the Midwestern United States to southern Peru and South America, centers of government were marked by enormous mounds of earth. Most of these mounds were flat on top, with palaces and temples built on them. Some were burial sites of honored leaders. American Indian cities were as big as the cities in Europe and Asia at that time. Their fine architecture is still greatly admired. After 1492, European exploration and colonization of the Americas revolutionized how the Old and New Worlds perceived themselves. Many of the first major contacts were in Florida and the Gulf Coast by Spanish explorers. From the 16th through the 19th centuries, the population of Indians sharply declined. Most mainstream scholars believe that, among the various contributing factors, epidemic disease was the overwhelming cause of the population decline of the Native Americans, because of their lack of immunity to new diseases brought from Europe, such as measles, chickenpox, cholera, yellow fever, and many more devastating diseases. However, these diseases were rarely fatal among Europeans. With the meeting of two worlds, animals, insects, and plants were carried from one to the other, both deliberately and by chance, in what is called the Columbian Exchange, especially horse, which escaped and began to breed and increase their numbers in the wild. Native America used horses to carry goods, to hunt game, and to conduct wars and horse raids. The Europeans started colonizing the Americas in order to cultivate new farmlands and create new jobs for the growing populations of Europe. To do so, they often fought Native American tribal nations for the land. During the American Revolution, the newly proclaimed United States competed with the British for the allegiance of Native American nations east of the Mississippi River. Most Native Americans who joined the struggle sided with the British, based both on their trading relationships and hopes that the colonial defeat would result in a halt to further colonial expansion onto Native American land. The United States was eager to expand, develop farming and settlements in new areas, and satisfy land hunger of settlers from New England and new immigrants. The national government initially sought to purchase Native American land by treaties. The states and settlers were frequently at odds with this policy. United States policy toward Native Americans continued to evolve after the American Revolution. George Washington and Henry Knox believed that Native Americans were equals, but their society was inferior. Washington formulated a policy to encourage the civilizing process. This led to the Civilization Fund Act of 1819. As American expansion continued, Native Americans resisted settlers' encroachment in several regions. In the 1830s, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, a policy of relocating Indians from their homelands to Indian Territory and reservations in surrounding areas to open their lands for non-native settlements. This resulted in the Trail of Tears. Native American nations on the plains in the West continued armed conflicts with the U.S. throughout the 19th century through what were called generally Indian Wars. Notable conflicts in this period include the Dakota War, Great Sioux War, Snake War, Colorado War, and Texas Indian Wars. And one of the last events during the Indian Wars was the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. Here, warriors, women, and children alike were ferociously slaughtered by the U.S. cavalry. In 1919, the United States, under President Woodrow Wilson, granted citizenship to all Native Americans who had served in World War I. Nearly 10,000 men had enlisted and served, a high number in relation to their population. Despite this, in many areas, Native Americans faced local resistance when they tried to vote and were discriminated against with barriers to voter registration. On June 2, 1924, U.S. President Calvin Coolidge signed the Indian Citizenship Act, which made all Native Americans born in the United States and its territories American citizens. Prior to passage of the act, nearly two-thirds of Native Americans were already U.S. citizens, through marriage, military service, or accepting land allotments. The act extended citizenship to all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits of the United States. Under the U.S. Constitution, American Indians today in the U.S. have all rights to vote in elections and run for political office. Controversies, however, remain over how much the federal government has jurisdiction over tribal affairs, sovereignty, and cultural practices. Thank you for watching. Please check out our other animated history shows, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
Alrighty, there was a lot of information in there that we're going to kind of go through over these next few weeks. The part that we're going to focus on today was those first few minutes that talked about their life and their cultural elements, such as the types of homes that they lived in, the types of food that they ate, the way that they found this food and how they spent their time. We're going to talk about those cultural elements today. I'm going to ask you right now to go to Seesaw, and you are going to open up your activity that has just been released to you. And again, right now that persuasive writing is pinned to the top, so you'll have to scroll down. And right there, it is Native Americans culture in Indiana. Go ahead and open up that add response, please. And it says that we are going to determine different parts of Native American culture from the text. So we're going to look at the text today, and we're going to highlight different elements of the culture of this Native American cultural group. So you are clicking on add response. That will open up slides for you that have 2 slides of text, and then there is a sort that we'll talk about in a moment. I'd like for you to go to slide 2. It says Native Peoples of Indiana. Please go to slide 2. It looks like this, Native Peoples of Indiana. And take a look at your screens, see who we have with us.
This all happened. Miss Sousa.
Yes, sir.
This all happened.
This all happened. This is all very real. Yep. There were a lot of really rough things that we watched in that video, and we're going to talk about those, and we're going to talk about the social justice pieces that we can do in our country today to help other groups that haven't been treated fairly. Today, we're going to focus on understanding their culture first, because we have to make sure we have an understanding of what a cultural group values and what a cultural group wants for their life before we can help them achieve that being accepted. So it starts with understanding, right? We've got to understand different groups around us so we can show respect to beliefs and values that they have. Slide 2, so we can look at that text together. All right. I'm going to invite you to split your screens so that you can see my screen at the same time as your screen. That way we can highlight the text together and you don't have to flip back and forth so much. So right now, go ahead and grab your highlighter tool, select a color that you would like to highlight in. Make sure that it is a color that can still be seen through. So when you highlight, you can still read the text behind it. So I'm not going to choose purple because it looks like my text is purple and that's going to make it a little bit difficult to read. Okay, so choose a color that you can still read and that you can still see through. All right, we are highlighting, as our directions told us, cultural elements. So we're going to highlight information about these Native peoples' food, their arts, their languages, what they believe in, the way that they spent their time during the day. We're going to highlight these elements. Okay, all right, here we go. It's a busy day in your village. Your father and uncles are building a new house. Your mother and the other women of the village are working in the fields. Your mother calls you to weed the pumpkin patch. Your tribe's survival depends on the contributions of all. That sounds very different from a day in my life, at least. My dad and my uncle are not currently building me a house. Actually, none of the men are building me a house to live in. My mom is not working out in the field planting food, and I am not having to weed different pumpkin patches so that my tribe can survive. So these are very different daily life experiences than us. So let's go ahead and highlight some things that are different. So it's a busy day in your village. We still have busy days. Your father and your uncle are building a new house. That's very different. If I would like a place to live, I normally go visit a place such as an apartment complex or a neighborhood, and I look at buildings that are already there. I can't really ever think of a time that I said, I'm going to build this house for myself. So that's very different. Most of us don't take our own hands and start building a home for us to live in. So let's highlight building a new house. That's not something that we do in our daily life. Your mother and other women of the village are working in the fields. My mom is at work today, but it is not in a field. She is not farming. My mother is sitting behind a desk. So she's working just like I am right now. And you guys are working as well, and you're not out in a field working on creating food for your family. So that is a difference in the culture. So let's highlight that as well. Working in the fields is a different way that they would spend their time. Your mother calls you to weed the pumpkin patch. Now, my mom definitely still called me to do things, but when she would call me, it was to clean my room or to sweep the floor or to pick up the dishes after dinner. It wasn't to go do work out in the field so that my family can have food. So I wasn't having to go out into a farming type environment to make sure my family could eat. So those were very different chores. Your tribe's survival depends on the contributions of all. So it took everyone working and doing some type of job to keep these people alive. So if the children didn't go weed the pumpkin patch, the pumpkins would die and then they wouldn't have that food. So that would be a big deal. If the fathers and uncles did not go out and build a house, then people would die when there wasn't shelter with bad weather. So everybody had to work together to keep the tribe alive. questions on these cultural elements right now? Questions on their daily life? Levin?
Oh, that was from earlier.
Say it again.
I said that was from earlier on the.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry, I missed you. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. That is another section of text. We're going to start right here where it says tribes and cultures. I'm going to make my highlighter a little bit smaller because this text is smaller. By 1650, groups known as the historic Indians lived in Indiana. They are called historic because they lived after written history began. These groups of Native Americans did not have their own written languages. Well, that's different because we do have written language. We're looking at it right now. We're looking at our letters. We're looking at our punctuation. This is a written language. So Native American peoples did not have a written language. That's a different cultural element from their life and our life today. However, the Europeans who met them did. Written records from Europeans tell us much about these Native Americans. We're going to move on to forming tribes. After they settled in villages, Native Americans in Indiana developed different ways of life. Some formed groups called tribes. Each tribe had its own leaders and lands. Now that's a similarity. We have our own leaders and lands where we live. We call those lands cities. So we are in the city of Lawrence, which is in the greater community of Indianapolis. If we were to travel different ways, we would go to different lands or different cities. We also have our own leaders, just like Native Americans did. We tend to elect those leaders in our government. You guys learned about that last week with our election day. We also have leaders in our lives that we choose. If we were to go to a cultural group like a church or a club that we belong to, we might choose to participate with what that leader believes. So this is a way that we're the same. We do have leaders in different lands. Tribe members spoke the same language, wore the same kind of clothing up top, and lived in similar houses. Tribes had their own dances, beliefs, and ceremonies. We're similar with that. We definitely have our own dances, especially y'all crazy kids on TikTok, right? We have dances that are popular. We have beliefs, things that we believe in, and we definitely have ceremonies. Ceremonies are celebrations like a wedding or a baptism or a holiday tradition of some kind. So these are a way that we are the same as well. Environment and culture. Cultures were shaped in part by the environment. Depending on where they lived, tribes used different natural resources. For example, tribes who lived near rivers fished and hunted beavers. Let's highlight that because we know that they would eat fish and they would use the bones and the skin and the scales of fish and beavers for different resources like clothes and oil to burn and tools. Now, we don't do that, right? If you need a screwdriver to put something together, you don't go out and kill a fish and use its bone to turn the screw, right? You guys go to the store and buy a screwdriver, or you go to a closet and get that. But they use things that were in nature. So that's different from the way that most of us live today. The fertile soil of rivers and valleys made good farmland. Let's highlight farmland. We still have farmland in our lives. If we were not in the middle of a pandemic, we would have been visiting a farm called Tuttle's Orchard. That's one of the field trips that we normally did as third grade. So that's proof that we have farmland in our countries as well. On the nearby prairies, Native Americans hunted buffalo. They made clothing, shelters from animal skins. Let's highlight that. How many of you guys, when you need a new shirt, go out and kill an animal and grab its fur? Anybody do that? No? No, where do we go when we need clothes? Where are some of the places you guys go?
The store.
The store.
JC Penny.
JC Penney. Walmart. Yeah, we go to different stores. I got some. Yeah, I got some in the chat. Good. So we go to different stores. There weren't stores for these groups. They did not have stores to go to, so they had to make many of their own things. So they would use the resources around them, okay? They gathered fruits and nuts in the forest. Let's highlight that. When you guys are hungry, where do you go to grab some food? Do you go outside and pick something off of a tree every time you're hungry?
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
No.
I go to my pantry, right? I have a closet in my house.
Chinese.
Your refrigerator. Yeah. So we go to different places to get those resources. So this is a way that our cultural life is different. We have different places and different ways to get what we need. Okay? All right. So we have studied together just a few of the cultural elements of Native American life in historic times. Today, you're going to complete a sort. On slide 1, there are text boxes down here that you can move. See how I can move these around? You are going to sort them into Native American life or my life, okay? So for example, go to school. Did we read about Native Americans going to school? Nope, but you guys go to school because you're in it right now. So that's my life, okay? So you're going to grab each one of these down here and you're going to decide, are these in your life or are these in Native American life, okay? So what cultural group participated in these things? That's going to be your work for today. Are there questions on your work expectations? Okay, awesome. So today during your work time, you're going to go ahead and complete this sort. Let me